Okay, so we've got the vertebral column stacked pretty much straight up the y-axis there. If I show the joints, you can see that the rig is going a little bit posterior in the body, but pretty much consistently on all the vertebra. We also have a cluster and a lattice for each of the discs. And if you look here in the outliner, here's my root joint, which is that first joint, obviously. For example, let's go down to the lumbar. Okay, there's L1, and you can see, okay, there's the surface. So there's the joint that's controlling L1. There's the actual polygon, and then parented to that polygon is a bottom cluster, which is controlling this portion of the disc below, and a top cluster, which is controlling the bottom of the disc above it. So if I click on that and rotate it, you'll see that it's moving that. Okay, it's kind of like bubble gum on a person's shoe on a hot sunny day. All right, so now we've got all that we want, but we need more information now. What we need really now is to get this entire collection into the position of a normal vertebral column. So I've loaded an image plane here, a drawing by Dr. Paul Richer, I believe his name is pronounced. He's a physician and anatomist, French physician and anatomist. And what I'm going to do is I've got that on a layer, and it's right now it's in a reference mode. I'm going to turn down the alpha on this layer. I can click on the word alpha, middle mouse drag to the left or the right. Got a little too quick with it. There we go. And or I can come over and enter a number. Okay. Now I'm going to go lock it as a reference again so I can see it, but I can't move it. And then I'm going to create a CV curve. I want to make sure that's set to cubic. Okay. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the curve and work my way up, and I'll explain to you why I'm doing that in a second. Hit return to say I'm done. Now, the curve has a direction. So in order for me to, and I know what direction it is because of the position, the relative position of these 2 points. The first point of a curve, a CV curve, control vertex curve, is always a square. The second point is the letter U. So that tells me this is the direction, in this case going up. I can also make this curve a little smoother by using the number 3 to show it as a optimal. So I'm going to move some of these vertices around a little bit just to get a little closer. But it's important that we understand what direction this curve is going, because that's how, when we attach the spline handle to it, okay, what we're going to do is basically tell the software, take this curve and have the collection of joints follow it. Now, if the curve is not, and so the direction that those joints are going to be stacked or positioned along that curve is going to be the same as direction of the joint hierarchy here. So what I mean by that is, this is my root joint at the bottom. Okay, so the even though it's at the bottom, the root is on top, in terms of the hierarchy. So the rig is going from the root in this direction up the y-axis. So the curve needs to go in the same direction. That way this will align correctly. So let's see if we can get this to work for us. So a couple other minor little points that you can do. Notice my curve, I've got my points on here, but they're kind of where I drew them. They're relatively arbitrary. They're not by any means uniform. So a lot of times what I find works better is I'll grab the curve and I'll go into the modeling menu set, go under curves and rebuild this curve, and I'll rebuild it with a multiple of 4, because 4 always seems to work best in Maya with polygons being 4-sided, etc. And then make sure it says cubic, and when I apply it, you notice the curve really doesn't look any different, but see how the points are now, there's 8 points and they're a little more uniformly spaced. Okay, so just to make sure I don't want any history on this curve before I use it, I don't see any transformations, but I freeze them anyway, and I center the pivot. Okay, I do that every time I plan on attaching any kind of deformer or anything to a curve. So now I want to finally make that last step. So I'm going to go under the rigging menu set again, look for create IK spline handle, get the option box. Now the reason I got the option box here is by default the software usually says auto create curve. I don't want the software to create the curve. I have a curve. I want to use my curve. So I want to make sure that option is not active. Okay, when I'm done doing that, if I look down the lower left hand corner, it will change when I get there, but if you watch that lower left hand corner, it will tell you what to do. So it's basically saying click on the start joint with the left mouse. Now it's saying click on the end joint with the left mouse and then click on the curve. Okay, so now I have that joint system under the control of the spline IK, and the spline IK handle is using this curve as its guide. So I've got myself what I wanted, a pretty decent thoracic and lumbar curvature. And you notice the discs, they've kind of subtly changed their shape because of the angle of the vertebra that are obeying the joints, which are trying to follow the curve. Okay, so that's what we wanted to do.